Thank you. Hi, everybody. A little bit of a change up from application security to physical security in this talk. The previous CTF looked really, really cool, so go play that one and win the lockpicking set, because for the stuff that I'm going to show you, you can definitely use that. So if you are in IT security, that means you have to protect something, some sort of crown jewel within your company, some critical data, some critical processes that you are protecting. Because if there's nothing worth protecting, why would you put any effort in security? And these days, IT security has become a lot better. Where in the past you had a castle model where you had one strong wall on the outside, and once you're in, it's very easy to get everywhere. My clicker just stopped working, which is less ideal. These days, the castles, how your company's models are much more in depth. You have multiple layers of defense, you have a very strong outside layer, and on the inside there are multiple layers as well. That as an attacker, you have to get through. And all of those defenses are made against a specific type of attacker that you want to defend against. I mean, the internet is a scary place. They might attack your external infrastructure all the time. They attack your applications all the time. So a lot of the security effort is really meant to protect against those attacks. However, on the inside, the strong outside wall is protecting you very well for this. On the inside, the business still needs to go on. Even while there's a siege on the inside, in this case, the people still bake bread on the lower floors. They still need to bring the bread to the higher floors inside of the castle. And also within your company, you might have internal security controls, but because there's no specific reason, there are sometimes a bit more lax than you might want to. And that brings us to this talk about physical security, because probably your organization is already pretty well aware of what to do against digital attackers, how they can attack your organization, how they can get in. But this talk is more about somebody, a vendor, for example, who just asks the guard, hey, can I get in because this is part of the normal business process and I need to be there for my business that I have to do. That's the introduction for this talk about physical social engineering and what's the framework. I'm Ben Brucker. I'm a security specialist at Secura for 8 years now, and I'm the red teaming lead for Secura, where we do real-world attack simulations for our clients, which includes physical security. So within red teaming, there are a lot of things that you can do as a red teamer. The end goal is to obtain access to the crown jewels of your clients, or to figure out if you can obtain access to the crown jewels without being detected. And the scope is much more broad than on normal pen test, application security test, etc., because you can use any type of attack that you would need in order to gain access to those crown jewels. So physical access, social engineering, phishing, telephone-based phishing, rogue access devices on an internal network, internal, external network compromise, etc. Anything you need in order to get there. For example, you have a critical application, it's very well secured, it's really not possible to hack into it, but if I can phish somebody or place a keylogger and I get credentials to just log into an application and use it as a user, I'm also at the crown jewels. And this talk will mainly focus on the first two parts of this. So, just as a side note, I am not a lawyer, so anything I'm going to show you today might be legally dubious. If you want to do this in a professional setting, please ask the legal department if you are allowed to do this. And if you want to do this personally, please don't, because those techniques are usually not allowed in the Netherlands. Just to keep in mind. So just to give you a small introduction about how physical social engineering usually works. So first off, you are on the outside. You want to get into some place and you just need to look for any information that you can find. Often OSINT information, any information that you can find to help you to get into there. The next step, actually getting into the place, getting through the front door, getting onto the OT site, something like that. Because once you're in, you can start going for the crown jewels that you're looking for. And that's step 3. So you have a number of objectives, stuff that you want to reach within the company that you're targeting. And once you're in, you can actually start working on those. And finally, in the end, you do also want to get out without being escorted by the police, so that's also quite an important part for us. And the goal for today is not to give you a full overview of all the techniques that people might use in order to break into your company, because that's quite impossible and it's a really broad topic, but at least to get you thinking about what are your internal security controls and have you actually thought about stuff like this and what can you do in the future in order to make sure that your company is a little bit more secure. My main focus for this presentation will be about the third part, the reaching the objective part. And that is because I usually talk about the first part and the second part, OSINT and the getting in, because that's the really hard part, how to get into a company. But the third part, reaching the objectives, that's the part that is usually quite easy, and that's what makes it scary, because on there you can use pretty simple techniques and tools that anybody can pick up in 20 minutes, in an hour, just learn the techniques and help them to get further into your company than you would want to. So I'm not going to talk about it because it's hard, but because it's easy, and that's what makes it scary. So first off, information gathering. I do want to find any type of information that will help me to get into your place. For example, floor plans that might be that I can find on the internet. In this case, I went to school there, and on the website of the Gemeente Nijmegen, you can find all the floor plans for pretty much every public building. So that gives me already an indication about, hey, where do I want to go into the building, how can I enter the building, etc. Quite a lot of information. I can look on the internet to find stuff like, hey, did anybody make a picture of how your access control looks like? We have tourniquets, we have a number of back exits that people go to smoke, any type of information that will help me to get in there. But this talk is not about the OSINT part, just to give you a little bit of context. So next off, I found some information about you. I know where to get in, where the back exits are, what your physical security controls are. So next, I do need to actually enter the building. And there are a few different ways how to get from the outside to the inside. So one, I can interact with people. I can actually make sure that I follow the normal process in order to get into the building. So for example, I do make appointments with you for some reason, or I visit a building where there's a public conference and I do get lost on the way to the toilet, so that's things like that. So like, you follow the normal flow how to get in. Or you can follow the not normal flow, like, if there are back exits that people use to smoke, can I tailgate in? Can I find any other unlocked doors that just allow me access to the building? And the other way would be to break in, to throw rocks through the window and enter the building. However, that's our less preferred way, because then people will definitely know that you have been in, and that's what we try to avoid. And also not going to get into that in this talk. And in order to actually get in and not to get detected and thrown out of the building, you need to have some convincing story why you are there. And that's something called pretexting. I mean, we've used quite a lot of pretext. Are you a printer technician? Are you an elevator technician? Anything that will help you to get onto a number of places into the building. We've pretended to be school teachers that wanted to interview people at some critical infra location in order to teach some stuff to their students. Was quite a nice way in. Having a job interview, because then even into the most secure buildings, people want to hire you, so you have a way to get through all the security. Or if you can actually impersonate a cleaner, that is really awesome, because cleaners do have usually keys to all the doors inside of the building, and nobody asks a cleaner when they are walking around and doing stuff. So there's a lot of different ways how to get into the building. And the goal of a pretext is, there are a few goals of a good pretext. So one, it allows you to actually get into the building. It allows you a reason to walk around it without people getting suspicious of you. And it hopefully already allows you to interact with some of the crown jewels that you're actually after within the building. So these are the most important parts of how to actually get in. I mean, I'm going to show you later some techniques about how to bypass some security controls on doors, etc. But usually on buildings, on the outside doors, the security is quite good. You have quite good locks on there, and they are reasonably secure. So trying to get in that way isn't that easy. So having a pretext is important for a social engineer. So now I'm actually inside of the building, and then we get into the meat of the talk, and that's about reaching the objectives within the company and how to actually get there. So what are actually what we actually need to do as an attacker once you're on the inside? So I need to know what is my goal, why I'm actually here, and what do I need to accomplish. And are there any additional security measures in place that would prevent me from going from where my pretext led me into the building to the crown jewels that I try to reach? And that's where the improved castle approach comes from that I showed you at the start. I might be able to reach the first thing, but there might be additional defenses between me and the end goal that I'm after. So, some objectives that an attacker might usually go after when you talk about IT security. So first off, we do want to have remote access to the network, because Actually, hacking in from the outside is quite hard. You might have a lot of security controls around it. But if you just walk into your building and you place a remote access device in your network, chances are it might be much easier to obtain our objectives that way. For example, he was one of my colleagues pretending to be a fire safety inspector and placing some top boxes of floor plate, of ceiling plates, or placing remote access devices behind your printers or behind your TVs. There's quite a lot of places where you can put stuff like that once you're on the inside without probably anybody noticing that in the near future. Also, it might be that your networking closets are not actually locked and you can just directly plug into your switches and take your network from an elevated position. People might not have the screens unlocked, so I can plug in a USB stick, get a shell on the system, or extract credentials on there. There's quite a lot of stuff to be done on the IT side. But also on the physical side, for example, here's a colleague of mine entering the pharmacy of a healthcare provider, having access to all the medicines just by telling them, hey, we need to do some network testing because the network is slow in some parts of the building, so we need to enter here and do our tests there as well. Or you find things like in this case a controller for physical bridge that we needed to breach. And maybe you can find stuff that can get you further into a company. For example, there's a locker room that includes a lot of uniforms from the people that actually work there, that do work on the factory floor. We went in, went to the locker room, put on a uniform, and went onto the factory floor, and literally nobody will know we're actually not supposed to be there. And if you can't attack the digital measures that directly when you're there, you might be able to take them home. As one of my colleagues rolling out a computer on wheels and a healthcare provider and just taking it with them for further infection. But there's actually a lot of actual fun stuff that you can do. That's also why we like doing these things. But it's not always easy. I mean, you do need pretext to get in, etc. But there might be additional security controls on the inside that you might need to bypass. So a good thing is once you're on the inside that usually people trust you. I mean, on the first part when you try to get in, people are a little bit suspicious of you because you come from the outside, you might not have a good reason to be there, so you need to get through there. But once you're on the inside, you might have a visitor badge or people just assume you belong there because you already passed the first barrier of entry, which is the front desk, and you are there. So why would you question anybody who's in the building? But the other security controls, technical security controls that are in there might be a little bit harder to bypass because there's no that amount of trust involved in that. And that's why I'm going to show you a few of the bypass techniques. So in this talk, I'm not going to show you very fancy lockpicking techniques and all the stuff that you need to practice for a lot of time for. But I'm going to show you some very easy bypass techniques that take you 20 minutes maybe to pick up and learn, and tools that are really, really cheap to buy. And again, that's why they are scary, because it's so easy to bypass. So the first thing that I would like to demonstrate, and that is, if you have ever done any type of lockpicking, you're very well aware of this, are very easy ways for locks. You find them all over the place in, for example, archiving closets where you find information might be stored, the lockers that your colleagues are using to put their personal belongings in, the little drawers under your desk that people keep their passwords in on a post-it note, etc. So usually, a company needs to have quite a lot of those locks, and that means they're usually not that expensive. But that means they're usually very easy to bypass. And for that, we are going to use something called a wafer jiggler. Very easy piece of equipment. It looks a little bit like a key, but it's not actually a key. You push it in there, you shake it really hard, and if you're lucky, you can turn the lock. That's really how it should be. So I'm going to try to show that to you, but hope the demo goes with me, because you always need to be a little bit lucky when you do a technique like this. Let's see if you can actually feel it. What you do with your wafer jiggler, you put it into the lock, you shake it a lot, and it turns already. So that's pretty much how easy it is to get into most of your archiving processes, etc., unless you actually put some money into getting illegal locks with some additional security controls. But it's one of my favorite pieces of equipment to bring along, because it can give you a lot access to a lot of information that you otherwise wouldn't have. the same technique, which is really easy and really low skill attack that you can use on those wafer locks, is for really cheap locks that people use that don't have any security pins in there. And you can basically just rake them open. It usually takes a few seconds, unless you're unlucky. And I'm going to show you quickly how that works. So here I do have it's not a cheap padlock, but most money spent probably into the material and not into the lock. So you do need two parts in order to do that. One is a rake that you can use to, again, quickly move around inside of the lock and hopefully the pins fall into the right place. And you need a turning tool to actually turn the lock like you would with a key. Again, hopefully I'm a little bit lucky here today. So let's see. You put the turning tool in there, you put a little bit of pressure on it, put the race rake, and just start moving around in there. That's why I said it's a really low skill attack. You don't need a lot of knowledge for it, just a little bit of luck. Maybe it doesn't work the first time, you need to reset a little bit. Once more, otherwise I'm just not lucky at the moment. It's always tricky when you do this other demo and people actually look what you do. Bill Gates moment. Good point. I'm not at the moment very lucky, but I can show you probably later if a few less people are watching. Or maybe the end of the presentation. One additional fun feature is that on a padlock there's a really easy technique called shimming, where you pretty much put a very small piece of metal between the locking pin, and if it's not protected, it can open up. This lock actually said on the packaging shimming resistant because they had those protection thingy, so you can't put any metal in there. But it's great because you can just lift the plastic thing and then you can still shim the lock. So something that's on packaging doesn't always mean it's true. But yeah, I mean, lock raking, you won't be able to rake pretty much any good door on the inside. Also, I'm reasonable at lock picking, but I won't sit there at a lock for 10 minutes trying to get all the pins open, etc. But you can rake easy locks. For example, this was a situation where we wanted to steal a hard drive out of a system in order to analyze the hard drive and get credentials out of it. But they actually locked down all the PCs to the tables with a reason. With a cable, and they had a small padlock on it. But a few seconds later, with just a lockpick, the padlock was open, and we could extract the hard drive and actually get the credentials that we wanted. So in that case, more like a protection against an opportunistic attacker who happens to be there, so they don't take anything instead of a real security measure, which people might assume if you see a lock. Another fun one, which actually works really, really great in a lot of places against those doors, where on the outside you only have a knob and a badge reader, and on the inside you have a normal door handle. That's because those doors don't often have an actual lock that goes in there, just they latch close shut, and on the outside you don't have anything to open the latch with. And you can bypass it with something called a trap hook. Basically, as it shows over there, you push down on the latch, and it will open the door. Let me just quickly set up the door in the right way. So in this case, the door is not actually locked, just latched, and imagine that on the outside I don't have a handle like I have those doors with badge readers. So I'm going to still try to open the door anyway. So I do need to enter the hook in here, but in this case it's just too small. I can't reach it. That's why we're always bring a small pry bar. Just make a little bit more space. By the way, don't ever use this on a glass door because it might shatter. Just saying, in case you're ever in this situation. Luckily, I didn't learn that on the hard way, but one of my colleagues did. So you push it in, behind the latch, turn it, pull the door open. So basically what happens here, inside of the door, you put the hook over here and just turn it in order to push the ledge in, if you can see it like this. Again, it's a 5-buck piece of equipment that can get you through a lot of doors that are protected with ledge feeders. So something to keep in mind if you have those doors inside of your building. Another fun little technique that I want to demonstrate you is if you have those sump turn locks inside of your building. Actually need to put the camera on. I mean, you know that they're a little bit less popular in the Netherlands, but you do encounter them, but you do encounter them more in other countries. And for this, there's a fun little tool called a J tool. Basically, it is designed to be pushed through the door, and you can turn this around, turn it on here, in order to turn the knob on the inside. This one is a little bit more involved because I actually need to see what I'm doing. So I'm also going to use a mirror that I can push through the door in order to see what's happening on the inside. Just a little telescopic mirror that you can slide out. So first, I'm going to push this one through. Next, the mirror. And now, between here, I can look through the door and I can try to position the J tool on the other side of the door. But usually I do need a little bit more space because now it's really hard to maneuver. And I don't have a free hand because I'm already using 2 hands for these 2 tools, so I can't use my pry bar. Luckily, another cheap solution, an airbag, air wedge. Put it in there, pump it up a little bit. This one can generate about 150 kilograms of force, so you can actually open doors up quite a little. And then you can start actually going to the lock. And in this case, I'm going to cheat a little bit because otherwise I look really silly trying to bend over and try to get into the right position for the mirror. But here you can see what happens on the back side. So you do have your mirror, and then you have the turning tool. Push it over there. Turn it around. Click. Just need to remove my air wedge, otherwise it's stuck. And the doors open. So, fun little technique, however, do make sure if you want to use this, you better not use it in a hallway where a lot of people come by, because otherwise they will ask really strange questions to you. Huh?
People really ask, or they just assume that you're supposed to do it?
Well, hopefully people will ask. I mean, if you do an assessment and people catch you while doing this, then you will have another finding. For example, we had a case where people were actually trying to lockpick the door to a server room, and some guy comes walking up to them like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And they were like, "We're trying to get into the server room. Wait here." And they were like, "Oh, damn, we got caught." And 2 minutes later, the guy comes back with a lock, with a key for the door and opens the door for him. I mean, your mileage may vary. Also, another fun detail, if you ever need to use them, please be really careful, because this thing is turned with a metal wire in here. And I was in a situation where we were using this in the middle of the night. Pushed it through there, we had we had it nicely on the ledge, we turned it, we had a click, and the front part broke off. So now we were on the outside of the door, and the evidence that we were there was on the inside of the door. That is not fun. So then it was in the middle of the night, we couldn't buy a new one, so we had to spend a few hours in the middle of the night creating improvised burglar tools in order to get into the door. But you want to prevent that if you can in any way, shape or form. And then the last of the really easy bypasses that you see is if you mounted your door in the wrong way and actually exposed the hinges on the outside to an attacker. I mean, it seems really silly, but it actually happens quite a lot. I mean, door is locked. There are some specialized tools that you can use if you have a little bit of stuck pins, but basically the way anymore. Just something to keep in mind. And again, all of these things might seem a little bit silly because they are really easy, really cheap, and easy to learn. But again, that's what makes them scary, because this actually works in a lot of places. So that was part one of my demonstration, but not entirely done yet. Because, I mean, getting into a place once is fun, and then you can probably reach objectives, but what if you want to have, what if you want to go in there multiple times? If you want to get back at a different point, maybe later at night, when there are fewer people around to watch you. I mean, on the IT side, you of course have persistence, where you leave your payload on a system that calls back regularly, etc. But also on the social engineering side, you have persistence. And I'm going to show you two techniques. One, actually making a physical copy of a key, and the other one, making a copy of a badge. Both are the most common ways that you find. And you might wonder, actually making a copy of a key, doesn't that take a lot of time, and people will notice that the key is missing, etc.? But with the technique I'm going to show you, it can be done in a very small amount of time. So let's see that I have all the stuff that I need to start out with. So what I have here, one, a physical key duplication mode. It's not that easy to see, but there's like the general shape of key in there. I do have two components of a mixture that I need to mix for about 10 seconds for it to harden, or I don't need to mix too long, otherwise it will be hard before I push the key in there. And I do need a key. So what we like to do, if you walk around your building, your offices, maybe somebody left the keychain on the desk. Swipe the keychain, go to the toilet, for example, okay, you have 2 minutes of uninterrupted time. And then afterward, either return the key to the desk if the person's not there yet, or just drop it on the counter somewhere close by, and people might have seen that they dropped it, etc. I don't expect that anybody has cloned their key. So again, I hope that the demo will be smooth. Getting the stuff that I need. I need to have the two parts of this component stuff. I'm going to mix it, push it into the mold, because I don't have much time. I can't explain what I'm doing when I'm doing it. I'm going to mix it, I'm going to push it into the mold, put a little bit of talcum powder on it so the key doesn't actually stick, and then close the mold and wait for about a minute. It's like orange and white. Seems to have some harder parts in there already, so I'm not entirely sure it will work perfectly. One side, the other side. There's definitely something a little bit wrong with this material, but that's enough for now. Talcum powder. Put the key on there. Screw it close so that it will be nicely set in a specific position. And now we're going to wait for that a little bit. The nice part about this, as I said, it will take you about 2 minutes in order to actually clone the key, and then actually making a copy of the key. You can do at home when you get there, you have a little bit of less time pressure. I'm going to show you how to do it, but usually there's not something that you want to do inside of a toilet somewhere, because then you leave talcum powder all over the place and you're working with fire and molten metal, so it might look a little bit weird. Also, pro tip, bring baby wipes against talcum powder, so there's no trace of what you've done. It's almost set. Next off, what I'm going to do, when there's a set in a few more seconds, I'm going to open it up, going to remove the key, and cut a little bit of a funnel inside of the top so I can actually pour molten metal into it. Sounds dangerous, but it's not too bad, to be fair. However, another tip, always bring some band-aids, because you're working in a stressful situation with sharp knives, so if you bleed, you don't want to go to the first aid place inside the building that you've just broken into. Not a good idea. Let's see if it actually worked. It's not entirely set yet. Oops. Sometimes demos go a little bit wrong, and in this case there was something already a little bit hard inside of the material that I was mixing, but luckily I still have the molds of the last time that I did this, so I'm just going to use those instead, instead of creating the entire process again. Again, if you're doing social engineering and if you're doing this stuff live or on site at a client, it might become a little bit stressful sometimes. So see, this perfectly nice mold that I just created. I already cut out a little funnel at the top. Going to close it. Let's see. Next up, really easy. We have a small ladle, I believe it's called. A small piece of metal with a low melting point in there. It has a low melting point, but it's hard enough to make a key that you can actually turn and work with. And basically just need to do this for a little bit. Not too long.
How do you do that in the toilet to get inside long?
Yeah, that's why I prefer to do this remotely, so you just create molds on there, but you actually melt the metal back home. Also, if somebody visits the toilet after they just heard these sounds and there's a lot of talcum powder on the ground, they're like, what are you doing? might look strange. But I hope there's a fire on that bottom, otherwise sorry. It's starting to melt, almost there. Don't see on the camera, yeah. A little bit. It's a little piece still of metal. Okay. Yes, now it's entirely molten. I need to be reasonably quickly. So, nothing in there. It's a bit much on top, so I'm not sure if it went entirely in there. But the good thing about this metal is you can just reuse it. If it doesn't work out the first time, you can just melt it again and try again until you have the right key. Might need a few tries. And that's again why you want to do that not on site, but at home. While waiting for that, and now also have talcum powder all over my laptop, of course. The danger of doing this type of work. That is the physical key duplication. But of course, you can also clone batches, and you're probably all aware that you can clone batches if you don't have the right protections inside of them, like, for example, the MySpace Classics or the high-techs, etc. Those batches are really easily cloned. And especially buildings that have been around for a little bit that might use an older batching solution are pretty vulnerable to this. And why I'm going to show you this technique as well, it's again, in the sense of it's really easy to do for a low-skilled attacker just by having the right equipment and 20 seconds of time. So, I found the access batch on the table. I just swipe it. I need about 10 seconds, 15 seconds. See if I can get it in focus. I just put the batch that I just swiped on here. Can't really see, but there's an auto copy button. There's scanning. There's a MyFair card, great, read successful, and I put the card back on where I found it. That's all the time that I need with one of your badges if you're not protected against those type of cloning techniques. Now I take my empty card, that's the same type of card of the one that I just cloned. I click right, little bit. Verifying, very successful. Now it's full copy of the badge just 20 seconds ago. And you don't actually have to write it directly. You can also take this home, find the right card that you need, and then write it later. Again, really easy to do. An attacker doesn't have to have any skills. You don't have to use any proxmarks, etc. By the way, just because there's an awesome device, it's also based on a proxmark if you've ever used it, but pretty user-friendly with the screen and everything. And now we're going to see if the key mode actually works, hopefully. A little bit hostile, but sadly only the top part of the key went into the mode. This won't be good enough to open the door, so that's why you do this at home and try a few times until the metal went entirely into the mode. So sadly, that part of the demo didn't go entirely as planned, but I think you do get the gist of what I want to show you with it. So the getting out part, how to actually get out of a building without getting caught, I won't cover inside of this talk because we don't have too much time. But there's some time for lessons to be learned. First one, the really obvious one, make it hard for people to get inside of your building, because once they're inside, it's really hard to defend. But how to actually do that? In our experience, one of the most important parts of what you should do in order to make it harder for people to get into the building is to train your human firewalls, if you like to call them. So the people that are on the outside that prevent people from getting in. So people at your front desk, the people at the service desk, etc. People that interact with outside people on a regular basis. Also take a look at your external security controls. Do you have doors that open up slowly on the outside where people go to smoke and then people can easily tailgate in, etc. It doesn't cost a lot of time to do an assessment for this, but just having an awareness of where people might get into the building can already increase the security quite a lot. But even if you do everything right on the outside, never assume that nobody can get in, because people can always get in if they try hard enough or they get a job interview or anything else. So you also need to make sure that people are aware of what to do when they find somebody that looks a little bit suspicious. Pretty much every time we somehow get caught when we do social engineering is by having an employee that has nothing to do with security that's alert, like, who is this person? And they ask you a few questions and maybe doesn't really trust it, and then they reach out to another person inside of the company who might be aware of what should be happening, etc. And that sets off a chain of events that might lead to the person getting caught that's on the inside. But it all depends on the awareness of people. So actually make sure that the people inside of the company know what to do, where they need to send a message in case they see something suspicious. And what makes this hard is that a physical entry is not something that happens every week. It happens every week. It's really easy to train the people. But it's something that doesn't happen very often, but if it happens, there's quite a lot of impact. So how to find a balance between training your employees on something that might never happen for them, but is still really important, can be sometimes quite hard. Do not disregard your internal security measures. Do not put the hinges on the outside of the door to your server room, as an example. And use some form of network access control. I mean, no network access control is perfect. You can all bypass them. But if you use something like 802.1x and I need to authenticate to the network, I do need to put out the hotbox in some man in the middle position and then wait for somebody to actually use the system behind, etc. It can be quite tricky. So anything that makes it harder for an attacker to actually do something on the network once they have been on the inside, it will be really great. And also test, after you've done all the implementations, added security, test how well they hold up in practice to see if it actually works as you assumed it would work. So, thank you very much for your patience with my demonstrations and your time. Here are a few books that I would recommend if you are interested in the topic. And I don't know if there's time for some questions.
There is time.
Okay, if there are any questions. Sure.
Have you ever tried using impressioning as a way of obtaining assistance?
Please repeat the question.
Yeah, if we ever used impressioning as a way of pertaining persistence, so basically where you take some type of key blank, you put it in there and make sure that you see the location of the pins, etc. We've never used that in practice because it's quite a lot of work, and there are usually a little bit easier ways to get in. But if you're really good with it, it's quite a nice way.
Other questions?
Yes, well done.
Sure.
If you just repeat, what's the worst case, most dangerous situation you've been into record?
Can you repeat what?
The one thing you don't want to happen for never happened to you, like you caught physically, you caught hurt.
Luckily, I've never been in one of those tricky situations. I've done some trainings in the US and there everybody has a gun, so I'm really happy that I do this work in the Netherlands. It makes it much more safe for me. Getting caught is actually good because that means something's already going right at the client. That's actually a good thing because usually we don't get caught. One thing which I don't like is I take up too much of somebody's time as part of the test. As an example, I walked into somewhere, there was a front desk person which was really nice. I had paid work all like, hey, I'm doing network testing, blah. And she was like, oh, I don't know about it, but we're going to get you in. I'm going to verify it and everything will be fine. She spent about 1.5 hours trying to verify my story, calling a lot of people inside of the company, and she just couldn't. She spent so much time on it, it was really sad for me, and then she called somebody else who had to send me away. So, they were actually really good on the procedure, she was really helpful, but it just fell for her because there were a lot of other things coming in, she was really busy and she spent a lot of time on me. However, in that case, I still got in because afterwards I tried the back entrance and there I could take it in. So, a really good thing, but there were still improvement points in that. Any other? Yeah.
There's a lot of focus on blocks and doors and windows and holes in the walls.
Yeah.
The thing is, with a lot of modern office blocks, you get a blank floor, and then you fit it out with walls and stuff inside.
Yeah.
And because of modern construction, those walls tend to be made of something akin to compressed cheese. And so you get someone who's got €1,000 worth of security on the door,
yeah,
and you can practically punch through the wall next.
Yeah, that is a good point. However, the disadvantage of that is that it will definitely be noticed that you have been in. Then that really depends on your attacker model. Like, if it's somebody that you want to prevent physically from stealing your stuff, then definitely you might want to protect against that. In a sense of what we see attackers doing that want to obtain access to your digital domain. That doesn't happen too often because usually people want to stay under the radar because that's just the first way in and they don't want to be detected until they have your crown jewels. But if you put most of money on the doors, also having good walls might really help.
The related one to that is, as testers, is it possible that we're a bit too dainty in what we're doing? We're worried about the getting in, not getting caught, not making it obvious that we've done it, and overlooking the fact that there's a lot of people that aren't that dainty. They are quite happy to go through the wall to get what they need. And that's a good way of disguising we came for your healthcare records, and we saw all of your monitors as well.
Yeah, I mean, it all depends on the scenario that you want to do. If you want to get to the digital crown jewels and have a distraction of actually breaking through walls, etc. I mean, a client once suggested, what would happen if you took a van and drove it through the front door and all the alarms went off and somebody else went off from the back end? And I was like, that could work, but we're not actually going to do that for obvious reasons. But it depends on what you want to simulate. And you do have a good point in that for certain attacks it might make sense to go for the more forceful approach.
Okay, thank you so much. I suggest that if there's more questions on that, then we get the break.
Yep.
Guys and ladies, just give Ben a big warm applause.